Number 12, was Princess Diana's death really an accident? The world came to a standstill on August 31, 1997. Princess Diana, the beloved people's princess, died in a car crash in Paris's Pont de l'Alma tunnel. The Mercedes she was traveling in with her companion Dodi Fayed crashed while being pursued by paparazzi. The driver, Henry Paul, was later found to have alcohol in his system above the legal limit. Yet questions linger decades later. Many couldn't accept that Diana's death was simply a tragic accident. Conspiracy theories emerged almost immediately. Some believed it was an assassination ordered by elements within the British establishment who feared Diana's relationship with Dodi, the son of Egyptian businessman Mohammed al-Fayed. Mohammed himself became one of the most vocal proponents of conspiracy theories surrounding the crash. Diana had recently been stripped of her Royal Highness title following her divorce from Prince Charles. She remained immensely popular, often overshadowing other royals. Her humanitarian work with AIDS patients and campaign against landmines had earned her global admiration. Some theorists suggested her independent stance and unpredictability made her a liability to the royal family. The official investigations, including Operation Paget in the UK and a French judicial investigation, concluded the crash was an accident caused by Henry Paul's negligent driving while intoxicated and affected by prescription drugs. The pursuing paparazzi were also blamed for contributing to the dangerous situation. Yet polls show significant percentages of the public in Britain and elsewhere still believe there was foul play involved. Diana's final moments became the subject of intense scrutiny. Reports that she was conscious after the crash, that she spoke final words, and questions about the emergency response time fueled speculation. The fact that she was pronounced dead at a hospital rather than at the scene led some to wonder if she might have survived with different medical care. Diana's funeral was watched by millions globally, with Elton John performing "Candle in the Wind" rewritten in her honor. Her sons, Princes William and Harry, walked behind her coffin in a heartbreaking procession that became one of the most indelible images of the late 20th century. The outpouring of public grief was unprecedented for a royal figure, demonstrating just how much she had connected with ordinary people despite, or perhaps because of, her turbulent relationship with the royal institution. Number 11. How did Rasputin really die? Could anyone truly survive poisoning, multiple gunshots, a beating, and drowning? The death of Grigori Rasputin, the mysterious Russian mystic who gained enormous influence over Tsar Nicholas II and his wife Alexandra, remains one of history's most bizarre and contested royal-adjacent deaths. The commonly told story sounds like fiction. On December 30, 1916, a group of nobles led by Prince Felix Yusupov lured Rasputin to Yusupov's palace. They allegedly fed him cakes and wine laced with cyanide, but the poison seemed to have no effect. Frustrated, Yusupov shot Rasputin, who collapsed. Thinking him dead, the conspirators went upstairs to celebrate. When Yusupov returned to check on the body, Rasputin suddenly sprang to life and attacked him before fleeing into the palace courtyard. The conspirators shot him multiple times, beat him with clubs, tied him up, and threw him into the freezing Neva River, where he finally died by drowning. This dramatic account originated primarily from Yusupov himself, who had every reason to embellish the tale to portray himself as a hero who had eliminated a dangerous influence on the royal family. Modern historians question many elements of this narrative. The autopsy report suggested a much simpler death. A single bullet to the forehead likely killed Rasputin instantly. Rasputin's extraordinary influence over the imperial family stemmed from his apparent ability to ease the suffering of Tsarevich Alexei, who had hemophilia. The Tsarina believed Rasputin had divine healing powers, giving him unprecedented access and influence. This made him deeply unpopular with the Russian nobility and church officials who viewed him as a dangerous charlatan with too much power. His death came during a period of extreme social unrest in Russia. World War I was going badly for the Russian Empire, and the Tsar's leadership was increasingly questioned. Rasputin became a convenient scapegoat for Russia's problems, with his influence over the royals seen as corrupting and destructive. Only weeks after his death, the February Revolution began the process that would eventually overthrow the Romanov dynasty. The mystique around Rasputin's death reflects the man himself, shrouded in mystery, larger than life and difficult to separate from myth. His daughter Maria later escaped Russia and appeared in circus shows in America, capitalizing on her father's infamous reputation. The legend of Rasputin's death became so entrenched in popular culture that it inspired books, films, and even a disco song by Boney M that repeated the tale of his extraordinary resistance to death. Number 10 was King Tutankhamun murdered. A boy king who died too young. A hastily arranged burial. A curse that supposedly struck down those who disturbed his tomb. The death of Tutankhamun has all the elements of an enduring mystery. When British archaeologist Howard Carter discovered the pharaoh's nearly intact tomb in 1922, he unleashed not just archaeological treasures but centuries of speculation. Tutankhamun became pharaoh around age 9 and died approximately 10 years later around 1323 BCE. For decades, many Egyptologists suspected foul play. His unexpected death and the subsequent rise to power of his advisor fueled theories that the young king was murdered to seize the throne. Some pointed to a dark spot on the base of Tutankhamun's skull visible in early X-rays as potential evidence of a blow to the head. Modern scientific techniques have offered alternative explanations. CT scans performed in 2005 suggested the damage to the skull likely occurred during mummification rather than before death. Other theories propose that Tutankhamun suffered from various genetic disorders due to inbreeding within the royal family. Analysis indicated he had a cleft palate and club foot and likely walked with a cane. Dozens of walking sticks were found in his tomb. DNA tests in 2010 revealed evidence that Tutankhamun's parents were siblings, increasing the likelihood of genetic health issues. Malaria parasites were detected in his remains, suggesting he suffered from the disease. Combined with a leg fracture that showed signs of infection, some experts believe Tutankhamun died from complications of these conditions rather than assassination. His small tomb, seemingly prepared in haste, might reflect his unexpected death from natural causes rather than a cover-up of regicide. The curse of the pharaohs that allegedly struck down those who entered the tomb added another layer of mystique to Tutankhamun's death. Lord Carnarvon, the financial backer of the expedition, died shortly after the tomb's opening from an infected mosquito bite, seemingly fulfilling ancient warnings about disturbing the pharaoh's rest. While most archaeologists dismissed such supernatural explanations, the coincidence captured public imagination and further cemented King Tut in popular culture. Regardless of how he died, Tutankhamun's afterlife has been extraordinary. His golden death mask became one of the most recognizable artifacts in human history. Exhibitions of his tomb treasures have drawn record crowds worldwide. The young pharaoh who accomplished little during his brief reign became immortal in death, his name recognized by millions who know virtually nothing else about ancient Egypt. Number 9. How did Russian Tsar Paul I really meet his end? Strangled in his bedroom by his own courtiers. The official story of Tsar Paul I's death was a stroke, but the truth seems far more sinister. Paul ruled Russia for only 5 years from 1796 to 1801, but his erratic leadership and unpopular policies made him many enemies, ultimately leading to one of history's most blatant royal assassinations thinly disguised as natural death. Son of Catherine the Great, Paul spent much of his life waiting for a throne his mother showed no signs of relinquishing. When he finally became Tsar after her death, he implemented sweeping changes that alienated the nobility. He reversed many of Catherine's policies, imposed strict military discipline on society, limited aristocratic privileges, and made unpredictable foreign policy decisions that frustrated both his allies and Russia's elite. Paul became increasingly paranoid, perhaps with good reason. He built the heavily fortified Mikhailovsky Castle in St. Petersburg as a residence safe from assassination attempts. Ironically, he lived there only 40 days before meeting his violent end within its walls on the night of March 23, 1801. The conspiracy against Paul involved high-ranking military officers and was tacitly approved by his own son, Alexander, who would succeed him as Tsar. The plotters, many of them drunk, broke into Paul's bedroom. The Tsar attempted to hide behind a screen but was discovered, forced to draft an abdication document, and then killed, either strangled or struck with a sword. The following morning, it was announced that Paul had died of a stroke. His son Alexander, who had agreed to his father's removal from power but possibly not his murder, became Tsar. Though Alexander I expressed remorse for his complicity, none of the assassins were punished. In fact, many were promoted or rewarded, highlighting the widespread relief at Paul's demise among Russia's ruling class. Paul's death illustrates the precarious position of even absolute monarchs when they lose the support of powerful elites. His reforms, while sometimes progressive, were implemented harshly and erratically, creating a coalition of enemies willing to resort to violence. The apparent involvement of his son and heir in the plot demonstrates how royal families themselves could turn against rulers deemed dangerous or incompetent. The Mikhailovsky Castle, built at enormous expense to protect Paul from assassination, stands today as a museum, a monument to feudal paranoia and the limits of autocratic power. While few mourned Paul at the time, some historians have subsequently reassessed his reign more positively, viewing some of his reforms as forward-thinking attempts to modernize Russia that were simply implemented too forcefully and rapidly for the conservative Russian nobility to accept. Number 8. Why was Mary, Queen of Scots, executed? Beautiful, Catholic, and threatening, was this a death sentence in Tudor England? Mary Stuart, commonly known as Mary, Queen of Scots, was beheaded on February 8, 1587, after spending nearly 2 decades as a prisoner of her cousin, Queen Elizabeth I of England. Her execution represents one of history's most dramatic royal downfalls, raising questions about sovereignty, religion, and female power that continue to fascinate historians. Mary's life was marked by tragedy and controversy from the beginning. She became Queen of Scotland when she was just 6 days old after her father died. Raised in France and briefly queen consort through her marriage to the French Dauphin, she returned to Scotland after his death to rule a country she barely knew and that had turned Protestant during her absence. Her reign in Scotland was turbulent. Her second husband, Lord Darnley, was murdered in a house explosion, after which Mary quickly married the Earl of Bothwell, who many suspected of orchestrating Darnley's death. This scandalized Scottish society and led to an uprising. Forced to abdicate in favor of her infant son James, Mary fled to England in 1568, expecting protection from her cousin Elizabeth. Instead, she found herself a prisoner. Elizabeth faced a difficult dilemma. Mary was her closest relative with a legitimate claim to the English throne, and as a Catholic, she represented a rallying point for those who rejected Elizabeth's Protestant rule. Yet family ties and the principle that monarchs should not move against other monarchs made Elizabeth hesitant to act against her cousin. For nearly 19 years, Mary remained in custody while Elizabeth's spymaster Sir Francis Walsingham watched her closely. The final straw came with the discovery of the Babington plot in 1586. Mary was implicated in communications about a planned assassination of Elizabeth and Spanish invasion to place Mary on the English throne. The letters intercepted by Walsingham's agents sealed Mary's fate. Elizabeth reluctantly signed Mary's death warrant, though later claimed she had not intended for it to be carried out immediately. Mary's execution at Fotheringhay Castle was botched. The axe missed her neck on the first strike, hitting the back of her head, and it took a second blow to sever her head. When the executioner held up her head, he found himself holding only a wig, as her actual hair had been cut short. Mary approached her execution with dignity that impressed witnesses. She dressed in the red of Catholic martyrdom and maintained her royal bearing to the end. After her death, Elizabeth displayed profound remorse, claiming her ministers had exceeded their authority in carrying out the execution so quickly. Ironically, Mary's son James would eventually succeed Elizabeth, uniting the crowns of Scotland and England. Mary's life and death became romanticized over centuries, portrayed in countless plays, novels, films, and television shows, often emphasizing her beauty, the tragic nature of her fate, and her role as a Catholic martyr in Protestant England. Number 7. Did Catherine the Great really die in a bizarre accident? Crushed while attempting to have relations with a horse. This salacious rumor about Catherine the Great's death has persisted for centuries, despite being completely fabricated. The truth is far more mundane. Russia's longest ruling female leader died of a stroke on November 17, 1796, at age 67, after a reign that transformed Russia into a major European power. Catherine's actual death came after she suffered a stroke while in her bathroom. She fell into a coma and died the following day without regaining consciousness. The horse story appears to have been invented by her enemies to tarnish her legacy, exploiting her reputation for having numerous lovers during her lifetime. The slander reflected both misogyny toward powerful women and political opposition to her policies. The German-born empress came to power in 1762 through a coup against her own husband, Tsar Peter III, who was subsequently killed, though likely without Catherine's direct order. This violent beginning to her reign, combined with her gender and foreign origins, meant Catherine constantly had to prove her legitimacy and Russian patriotism, which she did through territorial expansion, cultural patronage, and enlightened governance. Despite the unsavory legends surrounding her death, Catherine's 34-year reign marked Russia's golden age. She corresponded with Voltaire and other Enlightenment philosophers, established Russia's first state-funded institution of higher education for women, expanded Russian territory through successful wars against the Ottoman Empire, and amassed one of the world's greatest art collections, now housed in the Hermitage Museum. Catherine's personal life did involve numerous romantic relationships, including with Grigori Orlov, who helped her seize power, and Grigori Potemkin, who became her most significant partner both romantically and politically. She had several favorites even in her later years, often much younger men who received generous gifts and positions. While this aspect of her life was certainly unusual, it was her political acumen and administrative abilities that truly defined her reign. After her death, Catherine's son Paul, who had long been kept from power by his mother, immediately set about reversing many of her policies. He even changed the rules of succession to prevent future female rule in Russia. Despite these efforts to diminish her legacy, Catherine remained the Great in historical memory, one of the few women in history to receive this honorific. The persistence of the horse myth demonstrates how powerful women in history often face posthumous character assassination that men of similar accomplishments and personal behaviors escape. The false story has become so entrenched that many people know this one thing about Catherine while being unaware of her actual, substantial accomplishments that helped shape modern Russia and Europe. Number 6. What really happened to the princes in the Tower? 2 young boys, legitimate heirs to the English throne, locked away and never seen again. What could be more chilling? The disappearance and presumed murder of Edward V, age 12, and his brother Richard, Duke of York, age 9, in the Tower of London in 1483 remains one of history's most enduring royal mysteries, immortalized by Shakespeare and still debated by historians more than 5 centuries later. The princes were the sons of King Edward IV. Upon their father's unexpected death in April 1483, young Edward was proclaimed king with his uncle Richard, Duke of Gloucester, named Lord Protector until the boy came of age. The princes were moved to the Tower of London, at that time a royal residence as well as a prison, ostensibly in preparation for Edward's coronation. What happened next changed the course of English history. Richard had Edward IV's marriage declared invalid, making the princes illegitimate and ineligible for the throne. He was crowned as Richard III in July 1483. The boys were seen playing in the Tower grounds with decreasing frequency, and by late summer they had vanished entirely. Rumors immediately spread that Richard had ordered the princes killed to secure his position. This version of events was later cemented in Tudor propaganda, particularly in Shakespeare's play Richard III, which portrays Richard as a malevolent hunchback who coldly orders the murder of his nephews. However, some historians question whether Richard, who had shown no previous signs of such brutality, would have risked the backlash from killing the boys. Alternative suspects include Henry Tudor, later Henry VII, who defeated Richard at Bosworth Field in 1485 and who also had motive to eliminate rival claimants to the throne. Others point to powerful nobles like the Duke of Buckingham, who might have acted without Richard's knowledge to ingratiate themselves with him. In 1674, nearly 2 centuries after their disappearance, workers at the tower discovered a wooden box containing 2 small skeletons buried under a staircase. Assumed to be the princes, the remains were reburied in Westminster Abbey. In 1933, the bones were examined using the forensic techniques available at that time, which determined they belonged to children of roughly the correct ages. However, modern permission for DNA testing has not been granted, leaving their identity unconfirmed. The fate of the princes transformed English politics. Their disappearance helped Henry Tudor justify his rebellion against Richard III, portraying his victory as divine punishment for Richard's alleged crimes. The Tudor dynasty that followed would shape England's future dramatically, including Henry VIII's break with the Catholic Church and Elizabeth I's Golden Age. The mystery continues to captivate because it represents a perfect historical whodunit with limited evidence, powerful suspects with competing motives, and innocent victims. It raises profound questions about how far people will go in pursuit of power and how history is shaped by those who survive to tell the tale. Number 5, was Tsar Nicholas II and his family's execution inevitable? Bullets, bayonets, and acid to dissolve the bodies. Why such brutality against children? The execution of Tsar Nicholas II, Tsarina Alexandra, their 5 children, and 4 loyal servants in July 1918 stands as one of history's most shocking royal deaths, ending 3 centuries of Romanov rule in Russia with unprecedented savagery. The Russian Revolution had forced Nicholas to abdicate in March 1917. Initially held under house arrest by the provisional government, the family harbored hopes of exile to Britain, where King George V was Nicholas's cousin. However, George withdrew the offer, fearing revolutionary sentiments in his own country. When the Bolsheviks seized power in November 1917, the family's fate grew increasingly precarious. Moved to the provincial city of Yekaterinburg in the Ural Mountains, the Romanovs were kept in the Ipatiev House, ominously named the House of Special Purpose by their captors. As the Russian Civil War intensified and anti-Bolshevik white forces approached the area, local Soviet officials became concerned about the possibility of the imperial family being rescued. On the night of July 16 to 17, 1918, the family was awakened around midnight and told to dress for a journey. Led to a basement room, they were arranged as if for a photograph. Without warning, a firing squad entered and opened fire. The initial volley failed to kill all family members immediately. The daughters had sewn family jewels into their clothing, which acted as partial bulletproof vests. The executioners then used bayonets and finally shot each victim in the head at close range. The bodies were taken to an abandoned mine shaft, mutilated, burned, doused with acid, and buried in a shallow grave. For decades, the Soviet government provided limited information about the family's fate, fueling rumors that some members, particularly the youngest daughter Anastasia, might have survived. These hopes led to several imposters claiming to be surviving Romanovs. The family's remains were finally discovered in 1979, but kept secret until after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Excavations in 1991 revealed 9 bodies, with 2 Alexei and either Maria or Anastasia still missing. In 2007, these final remains were discovered nearby. DNA testing, including comparisons with living Romanov relatives like Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, confirmed the identities of all family members. In 2000, the Russian Orthodox Church canonized the imperial family as passion bearers, people who faced death with Christian dignity. The Ipatiev House, demolished in 1977 on orders from Boris Yeltsin, has been replaced by a church commemorating the family. The execution remains controversial in modern Russia, where Nicholas II is viewed by some as a martyr and by others as a failed ruler whose policies led to revolution. The killing of the children, particularly 13-year-old hemophiliac Alexei and his sisters, Olga, 22, Tatiana, 21, Maria, 19, and Anastasia, 17, continues to shock regardless of one's political views on the revolution. Their deaths represent the violent culmination of political forces that transformed Russia and shaped the 20th century. Number 4. Did Alexander the Great die of poisoning or disease? Party too hard or targeted by enemies? Alexander the Great conquered most of the known world by age 32, creating one of history's largest empires stretching from Greece to India. His death in Babylon in June 323 BCE, at just 32 years old and at the height of his power, remains one of ancient history's greatest unsolved mysteries. The official account states that Alexander fell ill after attending a banquet, developed a fever that lasted for 10 days, and gradually weakened until he could no longer speak. Before dying, when asked to whom he left his empire, he allegedly whispered to the strongest words that foreshadowed the wars of succession that would tear his conquests apart. Poisoning theories emerged almost immediately after his death. Possible culprits included Antipater, Alexander's regent in Macedonia, or his son Cassander, both of whom had reason to fear Alexander's return from campaigning. The potent plant poison strychnine, possibly administered in wine, has been suggested as the method. Others point to the toxic water of the Styx River, which according to some sources could only be carried in a mule's hoof without dissolving the container. Modern medical researchers have proposed numerous natural causes for Alexander's death. Typhoid fever, which matches many of his reported symptoms, is a leading contender. Malaria, prevalent in ancient Babylon, offers another explanation. Some researchers have suggested acute pancreatitis, triggered by Alexander's legendary heavy drinking and rich diet. West Nile virus, bacterial endocarditis, and even progressive ascending paralysis, Guillain-Barré syndrome, have all been proposed based on descriptions of his symptoms. Complicating matters further, some ancient sources claim Alexander's body showed no signs of decay for 6 days after death, which some interpret as evidence of a coma rather than death. However, this could also represent religious embellishment to suggest Alexander's divine status. Alexander's demise triggered immediate power struggles among his generals, known as the Diadochi. With no clear succession plan and only an infant son, his empire fragmented into several kingdoms ruled by his former commanders. These Hellenistic kingdoms, including Ptolemaic Egypt, Seleucid Asia, and Antigonid Macedonia, continued Alexander's legacy of spreading Greek culture throughout the ancient world. What makes Alexander's death particularly significant is the abruptness with which it ended one of history's most extraordinary careers of conquest. Having defeated the mighty Persian Empire, pushed into Central Asia and India, and planned further campaigns into Arabia, Alexander seemed unstoppable. His premature death leaves the tantalizing historical question of how world history might have unfolded had he lived to old age and consolidated his vast conquests. Alexander's body became an important symbol of legitimacy after his death. His general Ptolemy hijacked the funeral procession and took the corpse to Egypt, where Alexander's tomb in Alexandria became an important pilgrimage site visited by Roman emperors like Augustus and Caligula. The tomb's location was eventually lost, becoming another mystery surrounding the legendary conqueror. Number 3. How did Cleopatra really die? Was the asp just a romantic myth? Cleopatra VII, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt, has been immortalized in literature, art, and film for her dramatic suicide in 30 BCE. According to the most popular account, she chose death by snakebite rather than face humiliation as a captive in Roman Emperor Augustus's triumph parade. After the defeat of her forces and those of her lover Mark Antony at the Battle of Actium, and Antony's subsequent suicide, Cleopatra found herself in an impossible position. Octavian, later Emperor Augustus, planned to take her to Rome as a prisoner. As a proud queen who had ruled Egypt for 2 decades and claimed descent from both Egyptian pharaohs and Alexander the Great, Cleopatra chose death over such dishonor. The traditional story recorded by ancient historians like Plutarch and Dio Cassius claims she had an asp, likely an Egyptian cobra, smuggled to her in a basket of figs. The venomous snake bit her on the breast or arm, causing a quick and relatively painless death. This version gained further romantic appeal through Shakespeare's tragedy Antony and Cleopatra and countless artistic depictions of the beautiful queen with the fatal serpent. However, modern historians question this account. Venomous snake bites typically cause visibly unpleasant deaths with swelling and discoloration, which would have marred the queen's famous beauty. Ancient sources mention that when Octavian's men broke into her mausoleum, they found Cleopatra dead but looking as if she were asleep, with no signs of snakebite except possibly tiny puncture marks. Alternative theories suggest she may have used a poisonous ointment or potion, possibly hidden in a hollow hairpin or other item that would have escaped the notice of her captors. Some scholars point out that as a knowledgeable student of toxicology who had reportedly tested various poisons on prisoners, Cleopatra would have known which substances offered the quickest and most painless death. What's not disputed is that Cleopatra died by her own hand, alongside her 2 faithful attendants, Iaras and Charmian. Octavian, though frustrated at losing his prize captive, permitted her to be buried alongside Antony as she had requested. With her death, Egypt lost its independence and became a Roman province, ending thousands of years of native rule. Cleopatra's death transformed her from a defeated monarch to an eternal symbol of defiance and romantic tragedy. Rather than a political failure, she became immortalized as a woman who lived and died on her own terms. Her suicide denied Octavian his ultimate triumph and ensured she would be remembered not as a conquered queen in chains, but as a proud ruler who maintained her dignity to the end. The image of Cleopatra with the asp became so powerful that it overshadowed her actual accomplishments as a ruler who spoke multiple languages, restored Egypt's economy, and skillfully navigated treacherous political waters for decades. The romantic narrative of her death contributed to centuries of portraying her primarily as a seductress rather than the capable monarch revealed by more recent historical assessments. Number 2. What really happened to Edward II? Could a red-hot poker really have been used to murder a king? Edward II of England's death in 1327 has become notorious for its supposed brutality. The most gruesome account claims he was killed by having a horn inserted into his rectum through which a red-hot iron was pushed into his internal organs, leaving no external marks of violence on a supposedly natural corpse. Edward's reign had been disastrous. His excessive favoritism toward his advisors, particularly Piers Gaveston and later Hugh Despenser the Younger, alienated the powerful nobles. His catastrophic defeat by the Scots at Bannockburn in 1314 further weakened his position. By 1326, his own wife, Isabella of France, nicknamed the She-Wolf, had turned against him, invading England with her lover Roger Mortimer and forcing Edward's abdication in favor of his teenage son, Edward III. The deposed king was imprisoned at Berkeley Castle in Gloucestershire. On September 21, 1327, his death was announced. The official explanation was natural illness, but rumors of murder immediately circulated. The horrific tale of the red-hot poker emerged decades later in the Chronicle of Thomas de la More and was subsequently repeated by other chroniclers, becoming the most enduring account of Edward's demise. Modern historians debate whether this gruesome method was actually used. Some suggest Edward may have been suffocated or strangled, more conventional methods of disposing of inconvenient royals. Others point out that the red-hot poker story may have been invented to underscore Edward's alleged homosexuality, using a punishment that medieval minds would have considered appropriate for his perceived sexual transgressions. Remarkably, some historical evidence suggests Edward might not have died at Berkeley Castle at all. A letter discovered in the 20th century from an Italian monk named Manuel Fieschi to Edward III claims the former king escaped captivity, eventually making his way to Italy where he lived as a hermit until his natural death. While most historians remain skeptical of this account, it has inspired persistent theories that Edward II's death was staged. Edward's supposed murder benefited his wife Isabella and Mortimer, who ruled as regents for the young Edward III. However, once Edward III came of age and seized power in 1330, he had Mortimer executed and his mother placed under house arrest, suggesting he believed they were responsible for his father's death. Edward II's tomb at Gloucester Cathedral became a site of pilgrimage, with reports of miracles occurring there. This veneration seems strange for a king widely considered incompetent in life and possibly homosexual in an era of religious intolerance, leading some historians to suggest it might have been encouraged by Edward III to distract from the uncomfortable circumstances of his accession to the throne. The red-hot poker story, whether true or not, has become one of medieval history's most memorable and disturbing episodes. It reflects the precarious position of even anointed kings when they lost political support and the brutal realities that could lie behind the official narratives of royal deaths. Number 1. Was Ludwig II of Bavaria murdered, or did he commit suicide? Drowned in knee-deep water while under psychiatric care. The death of Mad King Ludwig of Bavaria remains one of Europe's strangest royal endings. On June 13, 1886, Ludwig's body was found floating in Lake Starnberg near Munich, alongside that of his psychiatrist Dr. Bernhard von Gudden. The official verdict was suicide by drowning, but the circumstances were so peculiar that questions linger to this day. Ludwig II is best known for building fantastical castles including Neuschwanstein, which later inspired Disney's iconic Sleeping Beauty castle. His extravagant building projects, combined with his increasing reclusiveness and eccentric behavior, concerned Bavaria's government. When he began planning even more costly castles while the state's finances deteriorated, officials took dramatic action. A medical commission declared Ludwig mentally ill without having examined him in person. On June 10, 1886, he was deposed and placed in custody at Berg Castle beside Lake Starnberg, under the supervision of Dr. von Gudden. 3 days later, Ludwig asked to take an evening walk along the lake with his doctor. Hours passed with no sign of either man. A search party eventually found both bodies in the shallows of the lake. The official explanation claimed Ludwig had attempted to escape by swimming across the lake and that Dr. von Gudden had drowned trying to stop him. However, the water where they were found was only waist deep, and Ludwig was known to be a strong swimmer. Autopsy reports noted no water in Ludwig's lungs, suggesting he might have died before entering the water. There were also reports of bruising on his neck and shoulders. Some theories propose Ludwig was murdered as part of a political conspiracy to remove a problematic monarch. Others suggest he may have suffered a heart attack or stroke during a struggle with his doctor or while attempting to escape. Some believe he did commit suicide, but not by drowning, perhaps using poison or a concealed weapon before entering the water. Ludwig's cousin Otto succeeded him but was already considered mentally ill and never actually ruled. Prince Regent Luitpold, Ludwig's uncle, took control of Bavaria. The timing was convenient for those who wanted Ludwig removed from power, adding to speculation about foul play. Ironically, the Mad King's seemingly wasteful castle projects later became Bavaria's most lucrative tourist attractions. Millions of visitors flocked to Neuschwanstein each year, generating far more revenue than Ludwig spent building it. His patronage of composer Richard Wagner, though costly to the Bavarian treasury, helped create artistic works now considered priceless cultural treasures. Ludwig's mysterious death transformed him from a problematic ruler into a romantic figure, the Swan King, or Fairy Tale King, whose tragic end seemed to reflect the clash between artistic dreaming and political reality. Bavarians who might have criticized his extravagance during his lifetime began to view him as a misunderstood visionary after his death. Today, his image appears on beer steins and tourist merchandise throughout Bavaria, his controversial life and mysterious death having metamorphosed into a cultural brand that defines the region to visitors from around the world. Could Ludwig's death have been an accident after all, or are some royal secrets destined to remain forever unresolved?